All right, so today we are going to apply multiplying fractions by looking at an area of a rectangle. So you can find the area of a rectangle. So my learning target would be I can find the area of a rectangle by multiplying two fractions together and using visual models. So if we take a look at our solve and share, it says a rectangular poster is 1/4 yard wide and 3/4 yard tall. What is its area? Solve this problem any way that we choose. So if it is going to be 1/4 yards wide and 3/4 yards tall, if I'm using a grid, so if I use a grid to help me solve this, the first thing I need to do is I need to find how many squares I would use to represent my total unit. And so to do this, what I would do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up my problem. So I have 1/4 yard wide. So I have 1/4 yard times 3/4 yard. And then I want to see what this looks like visually. I know what my answer is going to be, but to find how many grids or how many squares I'm going to use, if I have a grid that looks like this, I'm going to go ahead and multiply my denominator together. So I end up with 16. So I'm going to go ahead and mark off 16 squares. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So my line's going to go to here, and then I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. So that right there should be, if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I need to go down one more. So here is my grid that I'm going to use to help me find it. And then to determine how much of this grid I would shade in, I'm going to multiply my numerators together. So 1 times 3 is going to be 3, and I get 3/16. So I would need to shade in 3/16 of that. That tells me what is the area? The area is going to be 3/16 yards squared. So you need to either have yards squared or square yards. Because I'm multiplying to find the area, I multiply the two dimensions together, so I need to represent both dimensions in my answer. So if you just gave me 3/16 yard, it would be wrong. Make sure that you include your units of measurement. Okay. If we take a look at the look back, it says is the area of a poster that is 3/4 yard wide and 1/4 yard tall the same as the area of the poster above? Explain. So my answer on this is going to be yes, it's going to be the same because of commutative property. So I can flip my factors around and I'm still going to end up with the same product. So the commutative property of multiplication allows me to flip my factors to use or to find the same product. So yes, because the commutative property, sorry, I forgot that word, property of multiplication is used. So I end up with the same answer if I have 3/4 yard wide and 1/4 yard tall area poster. Okay. All right. So moving into our visual learning, it says, how can you find the area of a rectangle with fractional side lengths? So again, looking at the fractions. So Jenny has a rectangular garden. What is the area of her garden? So if I take a look here, my first fractional measurement that I have is 5/4 of a yard. Fractional measurements 2/3 of a yard. So again, it's not just multiplying and finding. I know you guys know how to multiply, and yes, you can see it, but it also helps you to see it visually. So I know that I'm going to multiply 5/4 times 2/3. So when we find the area, if you remember that the area is going to be equal to length times width. So it's length times width. So area, we are multiplying these two values together. So when I multiply these values together, I'm going to end up with 10/12. So my answer is going to be 10/12 yards squared, but I want to be able to see what this looks like with an area model. So the first step is to figure out how many yards or how many rectangles I'm going to use. So if you look right here, I'm going to use 12 rectangles total because a 1/4 wide and 1/3 high fit into each unit square. So I'm using 12 of those rectangles. Okay, a rectangle with a width of 5/4. So take a look. Here's my width of 5/4, and a height of 2/3 is going to be tiled with a 5x2 rectangle, with each one of these representing 1/12. So the area of Jenny's garden is 10/12 square yards. This one looks a little bit different. Okay, so this is my area unit of 1. This is my area unit of 1. Notice that this length goes further because it's 7/4, and then I have 2/3. So I'm not necessarily using this guy over here because I'm only multiplying 2/3 wide by 7/4 yards long. So I'm going to do 2/3 yards times 7/4 yards. And when I do that, I end up with 14/12 yards squared. And I can simplify that. So when I simplify that, I'm going to end up with 7/6 yards squared. Okay, so I need to show what that looks like. So notice that my 2/3 only goes to here. So I'm only using this much of the rectangle, and then I'm using the entire length of the rectangle because I'm using 7/4. So this right here, if I shade all of this in, this represents the area of my rectangle. Now you really just need to be able to read your rectangles. You're not necessarily going to be doing a lot of drawing, but you need to understand what this represents visually. Okay, moving on to your guided practice. So if we take a look at your guided practice, it says if you do not remember the formula for finding the area of a rectangle, how can you find its area? So if you don't remember that area of a rectangle is equal to, so area is equal to length times width. So if you don't remember that, what you'll need to do is you will need to create your square on a grid paper. So you'll need to use grid paper to help you find your area from there. Okay, so how could we define area? So area, when we talk about the definition of area, area is going to be the number of square units used to cover a figure, whether it's a rectangle, a square, a pentagon, a triangle. It's going to be used to cover a figure. Okay, so again, area is going to equal length times width. So that might be something that is helpful to put at the top of your paper on both sides, that area is equal to length times width. Okay, so find the area of a rectangle with the side lengths 2/3 foot and 1/2 foot. So it's going to be 2/3 times 1/2. Again, look for your cross cancellation. I can cross cancel those, both become 1. So my area is going to be 1/3 foot or feet squared. So again, make sure that you are including that square in your answer, otherwise it's not going to be correct. All right, find the square, the area of a square with side lengths of 5/4 inches. So a square is going to have the same area equals length times width. But here's the thing about a square. Squares, all sides are the same length, so they're only going to give me one side length, so I need to do 5/4 times 5/4, and then that will give me the area. So 5 times 5 is going to be 25. 4 times 4 is going to be 16. So I have 25/16 inches squared. So again, using that square inches. Okay. All right. So you are going to be working on your independent practice. If you take a look, you'll notice that we have those models. And so let's go ahead and do one of those models together just so you can see what that looks like. So this right here is representing the whole part. So it's representing a 1 foot measurement we're looking for the area of a 1/2 foot and a 1/4 foot. So number 5 would be 1/2 times 1/4, which is going to be equal to 1/8 feet squared. So I need to be able to just multiply the two fractions together, but I can see visually this is what it looks like if I'm looking at a area of 1 centimeters versus partial centimeters. So here, this is what a foot would represent. This is what an eighth of a foot would look like. So you are going to do 5 through 13, or sorry, not 5 through 13 because I did 5. You're going to do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So getting that practice in with your multiplication of fractions. And then on your math practices and problem solving, I would like for you to please do number 15. I would like for you to do 14 because it's good to get that practice in. You are going to do problem number 18. So let me move my paper down a little bit. You're going to do, I went too far, problem 18. You're going to then do 21 and 22. So those are the problems that I'd like for you to do in today's practice.